Interfaith celebration of animals. Yes, it is being recorded, and I hope it will be put on Facebook and it will be put on the Animal Interfaith Alliance website. We gather together to celebrate our fellow living beings of wing and fur and fin who share this fragile planet with us. We honor the life force, the great intelligence who creates their vital spark. We admire their beauty and we respect what nature has made them. Each of us here is part of the interconnected web of life in all its myriad forms. In our common reverence for life, we gather together. Let us be still as we light our candle as a symbol of our unity with all creation. We thought, because the video is so inspirational, we would start with a video. I don't know whether you'd like to say anything, Dr. Sprague, but our warmest thanks to you for allowing us to use it in this celebration.
Thank you so much. I'd like to say just a few.
Sorry, perhaps people could mute themselves while Dr. Sprague is speaking.
Just a few words about the film. This film was created in late 2018, and it was created because Gwen Guibord, who founded the Guibord Center, and I were doing some work with Animal Defenders International there in the UK, and we were deeply impressed with the breadth of the work that they're doing on behalf of animals. And we were surprised that there was no voice of faith anywhere. And the Guibord Center is an interfaith spiritual educational organization here in Los Angeles that brings faith leaders together. So I went to our advisory council of nearly 40 different religious leaders and said, we'd like to do something. And immediately there was a unanimous vote that we should do so. And so we picked up our camera and could afford filming for exactly 12 days. And the leaders that you see are leaders all representing the Guibord Center. This film was intended to open a conversation. It doesn't say everything at all about animals. It's just trying to get across the point that animals are sentient, sacred beings. And from that, everything else follows. So this is our film, Anima.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. Friends, and thank you, Barbara. I know when you had your rehearsal with Andre, nothing went wrong. These things happen. It's a truly beautiful inspiration.
It's always, I do apologise.
No, you don't need to. We could see how beautiful the film was, despite the sound quality, which I had no control over. And as I said, when the rehearsal went perfectly okay, but I'd like to thank you, Dr. Sprague, because I noticed you were the executive director of it. So it's a wonderful film. I've seen it several times, and when I first saw it, the sense of when you see something really inspirational, you're quiet afterwards because it conveys a message so effectively. So warmest thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. One of the things that we wanted to do in this film is to fill it with inspiration, not fill it with horror. Yes. And the comment that comes back most universally is, this film opened my heart. This film moves me towards animals. And I think as we all do this work, that's one of the things that we need to remember. We're trying to move the movable middle, not the extremes. And how do we do that? By touching the best in everyone who watches it. So thank you for watching it. It's in film festivals right now, so the link is not live. It will go live again early next year, and it's probably worth seeing in its in the form it was intended to be seen, which is not quite as chopped up as this was. But thank you for airing it.
Well, thank you very much. There was one point which, if I heard it correctly, was very interesting to me about the mistranslation of Genesis, in that it doesn't give mankind dominion over animals, but rather stewardship. Did I hear correctly?
Yes, you did hear that correctly.
That's interesting, very interesting indeed.
Yeah, there are people who, as I said, this film was intended to be a conversation starter. There will be people in all faiths who will come back and argue that it's okay for us to do this under these conditions, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the point of it was to get a conversation started, and most people agree that the wording in Genesis was never intended to mean the kind of exploitation of animals that we've done. It really was meaning more a kind of cooperation. It was what we all think of in terms of a unity of creation and working together. It was not exploitation.
Which truly touches the heart.
Yes.
I shall now have a prayer for all the world's animals in a universalist spirit. Eternal Spirit, for all living creatures of earth, sky, and sea, for the gentle eyes of deer, the friendship of dogs, and the playfulness of kittens, the humor of chimpanzees, and the intelligence of all the great apes, the grace of dolphins, and the magnificence of whales, for the bonds between all living beings, and our kinship with all our fellow creatures on this, our mother planet, we give thanks. We pray for all the animals of the wild in their beauty and glorious diversity. May we be ever mindful of the dangers they face, all too often caused by us. We pray for the companion animals who share our lives and homes, who show us loyalty and love. Bless them for the pleasure and companionship they give, and protect all those who suffer cruelty and neglect. We pray for all animals who suffer and die in laboratories, those who endure the horror and misery of factory farms, slaughterhouses, and traps, and those abused in the name of entertainment and sport. May we sense their fear and feel their pain. May we raise a voice of heartfelt protest at these and other cruelties perpetrated in our name. Give us ears to hear the cries of all creatures tortured in the name of science, skinned in the name of fashion, and sacrificed in the name of any heartless economic system which puts profits before lives. Give us eyes to see our responsibility, not just to our human community, but to all God's creation. In a world marred by violence and cruelty, may we reach out in gentleness, kindness, and love to all who live and breathe, suffer and feel. Eternal Spirit, inspire us with a vision of a peaceable kingdom, imagined by those prophets and sages who dream of the ideal commonwealth in which all living creatures may dwell in peace and love. Touch our hearts, each and every one of us, to work ceaselessly for its realization here on earth. Amen. I now have pleasure in sharing some Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain readings. They're normally done by members of our communities, but today I'm going to read them. And they're shorter than they normally are because of that wonderful video. The wisdom of Hinduism. See harmony in nature. Lend a helping hand to all living creatures. They have divine knowledge and final emancipation, whose hearts melt with benevolence towards all animated beings. Just as the footmarks of all other animals disappear in that of an elephant, so all other virtues are measured in ahimsa, non-violence or harmlessness. Those who behold all creatures as in God, and God, their common soul in all creatures, can never more feel hatred or contempt. Reading of drain compassion. In happiness and suffering, in joy and grief, we should regard all creatures as we regard our own selves, and should therefore refrain from inflicting on others such injury as would appear undesirable if inflicted on us. All beings hate pain, therefore one should not kill them. This is the quintessence of wisdom, not to kill any being. Viler than unbelievers are those cruel ones who make the law that teaches killing. All breathing, living, sentient creatures should not be slain or treated with violence or abused or tormented. This is the pure, unchangeable law. Propagate the religion which is a blessing to all creatures in the world, the teachings of Mahavira and the Jains. And finally, for this section of the Dharmic Indic wisdom, the Buddhist tradition. Some words from the Buddhist scriptures. Let them not destroy or cause to be destroyed any life at all. Do not sanction the acts of those who do so. Let them refrain from hurting any creature, both those that are strong and those that tremble in the world. All beings seek for happiness, and so let your compassion extend to all. To serve all the creatures is to serve the Buddha, full of love for all creatures in the world, practicing virtue in order to benefit others. That person alone is happy. One act of pure love in saving life is greater than spending the whole of one's life in religious offerings. Dear friends, during the course of our interfaith celebrations, perhaps one of the most moving parts is a prayer for departed animal companions. And often people bring pictures of their companions to be put on the altar. So we shall now have this prayer for departed companion animals. Universal Spirit, we honor and celebrate our animal friends and those who traveled with us a while, sharing life's journey in companionship. For these friends, we give thanks. We give thanks for the bond of love which grew over long days and joyful hours. You are gone from our sight, but what you gave us is still fondly remains in our memories. What we are now has been shaped partly by you. Abby, gentle Rottweiler, standing tall on your hind legs at the door to greet familiar faces with your pink tongue showing unconditional love. Cadbury, a gentle and affectionate Burmese cat, gone but never forgotten. Marmalade, a mischievous ginger tabby scamp, so often in our thoughts and so fondly remembered. Mr. Pudding, most good-natured of cats, and a loyal, constant, and affectionate companion. You will always have a special place in our hearts. All these departed animal friends remember for the bond of friendship and feeling created between us, the spark of character and personality in each animal friend who enriched our lives, sentient ones, who felt joy and sorrow, knew pain and gave affection. We remember you all for what you gave to us and for your own sakes. All your lives had dignity, worth, and purpose. For a few seconds, let us give thanks and take time to remember our own departed animal companions. Amen. As Christina isn't here, I shall read the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim readings. The Jewish reading is from the book of Isaiah, chapter 11. In fact, my favorite part of the Hebrew Bible, my favorite, I'm sure, of others as well. Isaiah's vision of universal peace. The wolf shall live with the lamb. The leopard shall lie down with the kid. The calf and the lion and the fatling together, a little child should lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze. Their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the ass, and the weaned child shall put his hand in the adder's den. They shall do no hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain. A Muslim reading, traditional Muslim story. We're told an adulteress was forgiven because when she passed a dog at a well and saw that the dog was holding out his tongue from thirst, which was almost killing him, she threw off her boot and tied it at the end of her veil. She drew water from the well for the dog and gave it for him to drink. This action was commended by the prophet. And a verse from the Holy Quran. There is not an animal on the earth or a living creature on two wings, but they are people like you. And the Christian reading, I'm sure we're all inspired by the story of the fights of Assisi, Wolf of Guibord, some stories of the Irish Celtic saints. Irish saints, we're told, were lovers of animals. St. Patrick, who wasn't an Irishman, his tenderness for the fawn is typical of many of the incidents recorded in the old books. When St. Patrick was given a piece of land at Armagh, he saw a doe with little fawn. Some of St. Patrick's people went towards her to kill her, but Patrick prevented them. He took up the little animal gently on his shoulder and brought her down to another field to the north. And while this was happening, the doe's mother was following the whole way like a pet sheep. And we're told that St. Columba, the Irish apostle to Scotland, had a pet crane who followed him like a dog while he was on the island of Iona. St. Brendan had a pet crow, and Marvin, a holy hermit, had a white boar as a pet. St. Mollera had a tame partridge, St. Cronan a tame deer, and St. Molling a tame fox. St. Kieran had a cow as his friend, and it's related in the old chronicles that St. Kieran's benevolence embraced the whole of creation. On the 2nd December, the bicentennial of the birth of Frances Power Cobb will be commemorated. Many people have never heard of Frances Power Cobb, but she was the first person in the world to found an anti-vivisection society, and she later went on to found another, the British Union for the Abolition of Vivisection, now known as Cruelty Free International. To mercy, peace, and love, all pray in their distress, and to these virtues of delight return their thankfulness. For mercy has a human heart, pity a human face, and love the human face divine, and peace the human breast. You may recognize William Blake's words, which express the tender feelings which human distress brings out in all people of sensibility, and very special individuals respond by devoting their lives not only to the service of humanity, but the eradication of human and animal suffering. That humane and compassionate spirit was shown by a truly remarkable and exemplary Unitarian, the indomitable Irish woman Frances Power Cobb. She worked with English Unitarian reformer and pioneer of girls' education, Mary Carpenter, in caring for Bristol's street children, and was a determined campaigner for women's rights. She was instrumental in getting a change in the law that allowed battered wives to separate from their husbands. But it was a single-minded struggle against vivisection, that systematic cruelty to defenseless animals in laboratories, that gave her lasting fame. As one observer said, Frances gave her time to theists, to workhouse inmates, and to women, but she gave herself, her heart, to animals. She was the founder, with the support of the revered Anglican Anglican reformer, Lord Shaftesbury, of the first ever anti-vivisection society in the world. She undertook well over 30 years of tireless labor in defense of laboratory animals, and devoted herself wholeheartedly to this cause until her death in 1904. So what makes Frances so passionately committed to the struggle against experiments on living animals? It was surely the realization that cruelty to the vulnerable and the defenseless was morally repugnant, as well as degrading to those who perpetrated it. It came from a direct personal observation of such cruelty and lack of humane feeling to our sentient fellow creatures. Frances describes in her autobiography her own experience of observing experiments on animals cold-heartedly sacrificed in the name of science. She wrote, "In that laboratory, we sacrificed daily from 1 to 2 dogs, besides rabbits and other animals. And after 4 months' experience, I'm of the opinion that not one of these experiments on animals was justifiable or necessary." An ardent dog lover, since her childhood days living on an Irish farm, Frances goes on to describe the cruel and heartless experiments inflicted on defenseless dogs. "I think the saddest sight I ever witnessed was when the dogs were brought up from the cellar to the laboratory. They seemed seized with horror as they smelt the air of the place, divining apparently their approaching fate. They would make friendly advances to each of the 3 or 4 persons present, but as far as eyes, ears, and tail could make a mute appeal eloquent, they tried in vain." Frances Power Cobb's campaign against such organized laboratory cruelties continues to this day. Today, we witness new horrors, which even Frances Power Cobb could have dreamt of, such as genetic engineering of our fellow creatures. We can be comforted that at least some of our fellow Unitarians and many others of other faiths wish to honor her memory by doing what she would most have wanted, carrying on the campaign for humane medical research and saving other dogs, cats, rabbits, and even our fellow primates from heartless cruelties perpetrated on them in the name of science. Today, we're able to do something positive to help advance the cause of scientific knowledge, alleviate human suffering and disease without sacrificing animal lives, by supporting the Cobb-Schweitzer Universal Kinship Appeal of the charity Animal Free Research UK, among whose patrons are Judy Dench, Joanna Lumley, and the Queen guitarist Brian May. let us show that we care by our deeds. I now call on my dear friend, Dr. André Menache, to speak to us the scientific and moral case against animal experiments.
Thank you very much, Fergus, and thank you all for being here this evening. Thank you so much for the video. And what I'll do is probably put a link in the recording so that people can access the original video because it's such a wonderful video. So I'd like to simply present you with two anecdotes, if I may. Apologies for not switching on my camera. I have an unstable connection, so I have to conserve as much energy as I can. So the first anecdote is as a young veterinary student in South Africa, I came upon the South African Association Against Painful Experiments on Animals, and that instantly struck a chord. And I thought to myself, what's this all about, painful experiments? And I realized, and I couldn't understand, that the good Lord would make the only path to medical progress through animal suffering and animal experiments. But every time I got into a debate with a medical researcher, they would always say the same thing to me. We like animals, but we like babies even more. Or if you want to put it more bluntly, it's your dog or your child. You have to choose between, we have to test on something. It's either going to be your dog or your child. And that sort of emotional blackmail is what motivated me to look for scientific arguments against animal experiments. And that's what I've been doing for the past 45 years. And I've been very lucky to meet some amazing scientists, doctors, who've certainly provided the answers. And also, I'm more optimistic today than ever before because the technology, the 21st century technology, is now ripe to completely replace animal testing and animal experiments across the board. It's simply a question now, not of technology, but of informing the public, informing politicians, informing shareholders in the pharmaceutical industry and in the chemical industry that these non-animal methods, these human-based research methods, are waiting on the shelf to be used. So it's all about communication now. It's no longer technology. And that is why I feel very, very optimistic, because change can happen very, very fast today. You know, for example, through social media and so forth. So that was really the first anecdote. The second anecdote, which was for me a sort of an aha moment, is when I took part in a university debate in Brighton in the UK. And I was up against the chief spokesperson for what was then called the Research Defence Society. They have since changed their name to Understanding Animal Research, which sounds a lot softer, but it's the same organization. And at the time, their chief spokesperson was a medical doctor by the name of Simon Festing. And we both had 20 minutes in which to present our slides in front of an audience of about 125 environment students. And at the end of the presentations, one of the students got up and he said, "You both delivered such convincing arguments. I don't know which one of you to believe, and therefore I must fall back on the moral argument." And that to me was a revelation, because what it meant was that we won the argument. In other words, we didn't have to win on the science. We simply had to match their arguments, simply sow a seed of doubt in the mind of the public, because we win on the moral argument. If you show any of these slides or undercover videos of what is being done to animals in laboratories people say, you know, I can't watch this, please switch it off. So on the moral, we win. And that was, to me, an important revelation, because I think at the end of the day, animal experimentation will go away, not simply because it's bad science. It's because 90% of the argument is emotional. People cannot bear to watch animals suffer. And therefore, all we need to do is to plug that other 10% when the researchers turn around and say, we're very sorry to be doing this to animals, but it is a necessary evil. And with current science, with current technology, we can take away the necessary. All that's left is the evil. And the public and society, civil society, will not tolerate unnecessary suffering. So that is why, in a nutshell, I feel we are in a better situation today than ever before. The technology is ready and waiting to replace animal experiments. We've got some wonderful legislation in the pipeline, such as the FDA Modernization Act in the United States, which was unanimously approved by the US Senate. It still has to be voted on by the House of Representatives. But notwithstanding the fact that this law has not been enacted yet, the FDA has already approved a first human organ on a chip. And that human organ on a chip replaces animal testing. So I think we're going to see an important domino effect, because once the pharmaceutical industry adopts this 21st century technology, it's going to require, it's going to ask of all the researchers in universities and in academia and in research institutions to provide them with new molecules, for example, against cancer, new drugs against cancer, but that are based on 21st century technology. Testing on a rat will no longer be interesting for the pharmaceutical industry. They will have way past that stage if they are now using human organs on chips, which you may or may not know, but are very, very predictive of human outcome to drugs. Whereas the animal model, animal testing, according to the FDA, has a 90% failure rate. In other words, out of 10 molecules that succeed and pass animal testing, 9 out of 10 will fail during clinical trials. So that's really what I wanted to say. So now I pass you back to Fergus.
Thank you, Andre. And I'm heartened that we have you and Dr. Richard Ryder, our president, who are putting forward these eloquent arguments. Some years ago, at the oldest hospital in the UK, St. Bartholomew's, which was founded in 1123 by an Augustinian monk, Ray here, there was a debate, and Dr. Ray Greek, an American scientist who was against animal experiments, debated with Dr. Simon Festing, I think it was. And there were medical students there, and Dr. Greek said, I'm not going to give any emotional or religious arguments. I'm going to give purely the scientific case against animal experiments. I'm pleased that the medical students voted for Dr. Greek. Before I hand over to Barbara for her inspirational address on Ahimsa and extending the Golden Alteration, I'll just have two other readings. One Unitarian and the other humanist. The words of Henry David Thoreau, the great American Unitarian transcendentalist and friend of Emerson. He wrote, "No humane being past the thoughtless age of boyhood will wantonly murder any creature which holds its life by the same tenure that he does. I once had a sparrow alight on my shoulder for a moment while I was hoeing in a village garden, and I felt I was more distinguished by that circumstance than I should have been by an epaulette I could have worn. And Thoreau also wrote, our science, so-called, is always more barren and mixed with error than our sympathies. Our final reading is by Bernard Shaw, a peculiar type of humanist believing in creative evolution. Shaw used humor to combat vivisection. He was a staunch vegetarian. The worst sin, Shaw wrote, towards our fellow creatures is not to hate them, but to be indifferent to them. That's the essence of inhumanity. Custom will reconcile people to any atrocity, and fashion will drive them to acquire any custom. When a man wants to murder a tiger, it's called sport. When the tiger wants to murder him, it's called ferocity. And finally, he wrote these words about vivisection. Once grant the ethics of the vivisectionists, and you not only sanction the experiment on the human subject, but make it the first duty of a vivisector. If a guinea pig be sacrificed for the sake of very little that can be learned from it, shall not a man be sacrificed for the sake of a great deal that can be learned from him? Words of Bernard Shaw, the Irish dramatist. Now it gives me great pleasure to ask Barbara to address us on our Ahimsa and extending the golden rule to all creation.
Thank you, Fergus. There was beautiful readings, really lovely. Right, I'm going to share my screen again. I hope for some better success this time. And I'm just going to ask if, Andre, can you see that okay?
Absolutely fine.
Great, okay. So we're going to talk about Ahimsa and extending the golden rule to all life, a vision for the future of animal welfare. Or is it a new vision? I doubt that. If we just look at AIA's vision and mission, our vision is a peaceful world where people of all faiths and none together to treat animals with respect and compassion. Our mission is to create a united voice for animals from all of the major faiths to bring about a world where animals are treated with respect and compassion. Is this new, or have the faiths been saying this already? I believe they have. Firstly, in the principle of Ahimsa, which comes from the Dharmic religions and mainly the Jain religion, to cause no harm to others. And secondly, with the same picture, because it's basically the same thing, the golden rule, to treat others as you would wish to be treated yourself. And if we look at all the various faiths, Hinduism, Buddhism, the Greek philosophers, Sikhism, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Confucianism, Taoism, and Jainism, and there are others as well, they all have the golden rule to treat others as you would wish to be treated yourself. We'll start with Hinduism, and all I'm going to do is take one or two examples from each faith. There's a lot more, so we're just skimming the surface. In Hinduism, the Upanishads are full of references to Brahman, the omnipresent being, being present in all creatures. For example, the Lord dwells in the womb of the cosmos, the creator who is in all creatures. I won't read out where they've come from, but you can see the references at the bottom of the page. Swami Vivekananda, the great Hindu speaker of the last century, said, "The highest truth is this: God is present in all living beings. They are his multiple form. The first of all worships is the worship of those around us. He alone serves God, who serves all other beings. In Jainism, the 24th Tirthankar Mahavira says, unless we live with non-violence and reverence for all living beings in our hearts, all our humaneness and acts of kindness, of goodness, all our vows, virtues and knowledge, all our practices to give up greed and acquisitiveness are meaningless and useless. In other words, all the things we do to try and be good are useless if we don't have non-violence and reverence for all living beings in our hearts. And also, all breathing living creatures should not be slain or treated with violence, abused or tormented. This is the supreme unchangeable law. Prince Neminath, who was the 22nd Tirthankar, there's a famous story about him. He went to his wedding and saw that there were animals all being held together in a pen to be slaughtered and for his wedding feast, and he refused to go ahead with the wedding if these animals were going to be slaughtered. So we move on to Buddhism, and even Buddha says in the Dhammapada, all your fellow creatures are like you. They want to be happy. Never harm them, and when you leave this life, you too will find happiness. And the Buddhists have a prayer which goes, infused by wisdom and compassion, today in the Buddha's presence, I generate a mind for full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. And our current 14th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, says, in Buddhism, the highest spiritual ideal is to cultivate compassion for all sentient beings and to work for their welfare to the greatest possible extent. In Taoism, they talk about the Tao being like heaven, or the thing beyond heaven. And they say the knowledge of the unchanging rule produces a grand capacity for forbearance. And that capacity for forbearance, leads to a community of feeling with all living things. From this community of feelings comes a kingliness of character. And he who is king-like goes on to be heaven-like. In that likeness to heaven, he possesses the Tao. So you have to start right at the bottom with a feeling of a community with all living things before you can grow into being king-like or heaven-like or knowing the Tao. Even the Greek philosophers, Pythagoras, spoke of animals. He said, animals share with us the privilege of having a soul. And he said, as long as man continues to be the ruthless destroyer of lower living beings, he will never know health or peace. For as long as men massacre animals, they will kill each other. Indeed, he who sows the seeds of murder and pain cannot reap joy. In the Old Testament, I think, I won't read through everything, but we're all familiar with the quote in Genesis, where God says he's given Adam and Eve the herb-bearing seed, and every tree, which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed, and that shall be for food. And for every beast, every fowl of the air, everything that creepeth, everything there where there is life, they've been given the green herb for food. And later, after Adam and Eve have taken the apple, he says, thou shalt eat herb of the field. In the sweat of thy face thou shalt eat bread till thou return to the ground. So he's still saying there should be a vegan diet. And it's only after the flood and with Noah where he allows meat eating, and this has been interpreted as a concession because humans are just incapable of achieving the standards they should be achieving. And this is the quote that Fergus read out earlier from Isaiah about the peaceful kingdom, and what Isaiah hopes of every animal living and being together, living in harmony. And he also says, he that kills an ox is as if he slew a man, he that sacrifices a lamb as if he cut off a dog's neck. And that's reiterated by Hosea. And he says, and in that day I made a covenant for them with the beasts of the field and with the fowls of heaven and with the creeping things of the ground. And I will break the bow and the sword and the battle out of the earth and will make them lie down safely. So here we see both Isaiah and Hosea turning against the cruelty of humans and the abuse of animals, and wanting to go back to this peaceable kingdom that was brought up in Genesis. There's also this issue of sacrifice, because people are starting to sacrifice animals to God. And Hosea says, for I desire love, not sacrifice, the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. So he wants people to recognize God in their hearts, not by sacrificing animals. Even Psalm 51 says, you have no delight in sacrifice. Were I to give you burnt offerings, you would not be pleased. The sacrifice acceptable to God is a humbled spirit, a humbled and contrite heart. And then we have the golden rule in Judaism, and there's a story about Rabbi Hillel, who was a predecessor of Jesus, and he was asked by somebody, so the story goes, to stand on one leg and recite the whole of the Torah. So he stood on one leg and he basically read out the golden rule and said, what is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. This is the whole Torah. The rest is the explanation. Go and learn. And I think that sums it up very nicely. And also, those of you who were at Rabbi Wittenberg's talk, he spoke of many quotes from the Judaic texts, and particularly this Tsar B'ei Chahim, not to cause any pain to any living creature. If we move on to Christianity, Jesus says in Matthew, so this is in one of the accepted texts, if you had known what these words mean, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent. And there he's referring to Hosea's quote that we just discussed. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. And in the Ebionites, he says, I have come to abolish sacrifice, and if you do not cease from sacrificing, the wrath of God will not cease from you. And we see a picture there of him in the temple, and the way it's reported these days is that he was angry with the money changers. But looking at some of these quotes, you have to ask, was he angry with the sacrifice? And today in Catholicism, we have the lovely Laudato Si on care for our common home, Pope Francis's encyclical letter from 2015. And there's some wonderful, hopeful quotes from Pope Francis in Laudato Si. For example, number 68, he says, clearly the Bible has no place for a tyrannical anthropocentrism, unconcerned for other creatures. In 67, he says we must forcefully reject the notion that our being created in God's image and given dominion over the earth justifies absolute domination over other creatures. And in 116, he says our dominion over the universe should be understood more properly in the sense of responsible stewardship. So there it is. Pope Francis is telling us that. And Islam have quotes as well in the Quran 638. Muhammad says, all the beasts that roam the earth and all the birds that soar on high are communities like your own. We have left nothing out in the book. Before their Lord they shall be gathered all. So again, an inclusion of animals in the Islamic faith. And also there is a reward for acts of charity to every beast alive. And whoever kills a sparrow or anything bigger without just cause, Allah will hold him accountable on the day of judgment. In Sikhism, we have the oneness of God and the oneness of creation. And there's this quote, life forms, egg-born, womb-born, earth-born, sweat-born, only God knows their existence in oceans, mountains, everywhere. Nanak says, God created them and takes care of them all. And there's a very strong vegetarian tradition in the Sikh faith, and a free vegetarian meal is provided to whoever comes to the Gurdwara, the Sikh place of worship. And all Sikh prayers end with the quote or the line, "O God, may your will prevail and may the whole creation benefit." So that's the whole creation, not just human beings. In the Baha'i tradition, we have this lovely quote from the writings of Abdul Baha. The kingdom of God is founded upon equity and justice, and also upon mercy, compassion, and kindness to every living creature. It is not only their fellow human beings that are beloved of God, that the beloved of God must treat with mercy and compassion. Rather, they must show forth the utmost loving kindness to every living creature. And we've seen, as Fergus has mentioned, the saints and mystics who followed on from these teachers. And we have just a few here, some lovely pictures of them with their animals. With St. Kieran with his fox and the deer, St. Columba with the horse who understood him when he was dying, St. Cuthbert with his otters, St. Melangel with the hare that she rescued from the hunters. There's St. Basil surrounded by all sorts of animals, and the same for St. Modestus. So where did things go wrong? I mean, up until the time of St. Francis, who lived until 1226, many saints lived and shared their lives with animals. It wasn't just St. Francis, even though he's well remembered. But just following him, St. Aquinas came along, born the year before St. Francis died, and he changed all that. He excluded animals. He also excluded women and foreigners as well, and he based his teachings on the thoughts of Aristotle rather than on Christ. Now, Richard's on the phone, he won't see this. It's a picture of, we're talking about secular ethics now, and we're talking about speciesism, which it's not a religion, but secular ethics is very important. And Richard Ryder, hope you're listening still, coined the term speciesism, which is the widespread discrimination that is practiced by man against other species. And even Charles Darwin was aware of this, and he says in The Descent of Man, the difference in mind between man and the higher animals, great as it is, certainly is one of degree and not of kind. Thomas Hardy reflects this when he discusses evolution, and he says, the establishment of the common origin of all species logically involves a readjustment of altruistic morals by enlarging the application of what has been called the golden rule from the area of mere mankind to that of the whole animal kingdom. And there's the lovely Albert Einstein, who's got this wonderful quote where he's saying that the human being is part of the whole called by us the universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings, as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. I think that's lovely. And we're ticking off from Gandhi, who says in his moral basis of vegetarianism, it ill becomes us to invoke in our daily prayers the blessings of God the compassionate, if we in turn will not practice elementary compassion towards our fellow creatures. They're well said. And so I'd like to end this presentation with a Jain prayer, which says, I ask pardon from all living creatures. May all creatures pardon me. May I have friendship for all creatures and enmity towards none. Thank you.
That was lovely, Barbara.
Thank you.
That was truly beautiful and inspirational, Barbara. And I know that it will be put on the Animal Interfaith Alliance website, and so more people can read it and appreciate the wisdom. I end appropriately with a Jain blessing. I forgive all beings. Let all beings forgive me. Let the whole cosmos be blessed. Let all beings be engaged in one another's well-being. Let everyone everywhere be blissful and faithful. May we subdue wrath by forgiveness, overcome vanity by humility, fraud by honesty, and greed through contentment. Namaste, all of you. My warmest thanks to all of you for coming and joining us today. And it's lovely having someone from Los Angeles. And I see that Shamanjeet is here. Warmest of welcome, Shamanjeet.
Yeah, thank you. We got very late, I'm afraid.
No, please. I've been to so many scores and scores of interfaith meetings, and I know whenever I go there and I see you and Adrit with his turban, I know I'm in the right place. So,
Yeah.
and of course, you've also been a faithful attender at all our interfaith services, bringing that Sikh wisdom. We do appreciate that. Once again, Dr. Sprague, it's lovely having you here from Los Angeles, and that is a truly beautiful video. I know the sound quality today we couldn't fully appreciate. Well, in fact, when we heard it again, it was, even though the sound quality wasn't perfect, we could follow what was said very well, and the pictures and the way it was put together was wholly admirable. So I hope that that's seen by millions of people. So thank you. Have you anything else you'd like to say, Barbara? And
no, just to say thank you to everyone who attended, and it's been a very enjoyable event. Oh, what's happened there? Thank you for everyone who attended. It's been a very enjoyable event, and let's hope that the world can change to treat animals with more compassion.
yes.
Here, here.
Absolutely.
The last thing I'll say is that it was lovely speaking to William of the Compassion Consortium, and his very wonderful suggestion that he approaches Greta Thunberg on behalf of the Compassion Consortium and also Interfaith Alliance, and so that we can come, because I think that by coming together in partnership we can do so much. And Greta Thunberg is popular all over the world for her witness. It's amazing. She's still only 19 now. So I hope that your efforts are successful, William. and that you can bring us all together. So thank you.
Can we have such events more often, you see? Now